Sure. Hello,
Yeah, that's good
everyone.
check.
Perfect. Awesome. Hello, Hello, everyone, and welcome to my Vinyasa Practices podcast, Heartfelt Consciousness. My name is Michelle Young, and I'm here today with Rachel Scott. Rachel, welcome. Thanks for being on.
Thank you, Michelle. It's so nice. I've connected with you sort of in the virtual space. Like there's been like all these kind of email connections or Yoga Alliance things. And so it's really nice to just, and I saw you briefly in person at the Nerve Tour, but it's nice to see you here.
So nice to see you, Rachel. I'm so excited to talk to you because you have done just a ton of work in the yoga industry as a curriculum developer, as a yoga teacher trainer, a writer, author, editor. Like you wear so many hats. And a lot of our students who either come through our training initially or they're coming through supplemental trainings are looking to take their career online. And it's always a great opportunity to have guests on that have done that and have, created this evolving career that's not static, that continues to move and grow with them. So I'd love to start at the beginning with what inspired you to get into yoga and move on from there.
Oh my gosh, self-preservation, I think. You know how it is. It's like if I remember, I started yoga in 1998 and I went to my first class because I had my boyfriend at the time was struggling with anxiety and and turned out he was kind of like bipolar and he had mental health challenges. And so he went to yoga and loved it. And at the time I was this, you know, ambitious, struggling artist in New York City. And so much of what I did with my body and myself was performative. And then I got into the yoga space and it was like, oh, you mean nobody's watching? This is just for me. What? And I'm a real vata person. Like I love caffeine, it's my drug of choice. And so yoga is very grounding. It's like it gets you back into your body in a way, or my body in a way that was really more accepting, and began a path of being able to be more self-loving, because a lot of us walk around with these voices in our head that are mean or not good enough or not pretty enough or whatever those thoughts are, which I had so many of them in my 20s. And I'd say that yoga was a really important tool in that healing process and the reclamation process of coming back to ourselves. So that's what's kept me coming back.
I love
coming
it.
back
I
coming
love it. I love that it was a balance for that artistic, creative expression of self,
back.
and helped you. I think that's where a lot of students that I work with, whether they're in person or they're online, they come to yoga and they don't understand that it isn't performative. Like they feel like they have to get to a certain place or have to do a certain pose, but really like the
Mm.
magic happens when you hear that voice in your head say you have to do that and you're like, but why do I have to do
Yeah.
that? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Such a good little, and laboratory is too cold of a word, but coming to the mat, she indicates the floor. Coming to the mat it becomes this little place where we can self-reflect, right? And we can go like, okay, is that true? Do I know that that's true? And so, it's not like that yoga is about improving our mindset, but improving the mindset is a tool that helps you to come to the yoga. So we can start to, you were talking a little bit before we started recording about limiting beliefs, and we can start to air those, right? And see them come up through the physical practice. And then we can make them
Yeah.
better, hopefully, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So how did you transition from the art world as like a passion or a career to yoga?
Yeah, again, I'd say self-preservation. I was an actor in New York theater, and equity, and which means basically like you get up at 5 in the morning, go stand in line for an open call with 300 other people, and then come back for a 10-minute spot to do your monologue that no one pays attention to. So that's kind of like the life of that in my experience, and that was really it became very sad, and very challenging and demoralizing in some ways. And so then I went through this horrible kind of divorce, as many of us do. Like, I went through a rough experience, and that experience and a lot of upheaval in my personal life at that time meant that the arts just didn't feel as, and I love the arts, the profession is sometimes hard, but arts are amazing. But the business of it was really hard. And I'd also already become a teacher because I loved it in yoga, and the yoga world and its lessons and what I could learn from it was a much more nourishing place to work through some of these challenges and these difficult times in my life, divorce, moving, loss, death, all of these things. Yoga became a place that was welcoming for that experience and to move through it in a way. And the arts, not so much, like going in and getting rejected at auditions was like, I was like, I can't do it right now.
Yeah.
So then I, kind of transitioned more fully into that. It'd been on the sidelines, it'd been a companion, and then it became more of the center stage of what I was doing.
Absolutely. I think that is where a lot of our students are. They have it as a companion and they're ready to move forward and, and develop a career that is based in yoga. How did you do that? What were some of the pivotal decisions that you made to transition from one career to another?
Yeah, I'd say it was much more organic for me than it was like, okay, this is it. And I think one of the things that pulled me into that transition, which is a little different than some of our folks out there, was that I'd always been involved in big studios. So when I did my first teacher training in New York, I was with B Yoga, which had 5 studios, and then YogaWorks came in. I did the teacher training with them. They had a bunch of studios, and already from the beginning to finance my 300, I did work study, right? And then they were like, hey, you seem good at this. Why don't you stick on around and help us with the teacher management? And so I had a foot in the studio system and had been doing that part-time. And then, as like the sideline to my acting career, I was doing this. And then in Vancouver, I was offered a job studio managing. And so I got connected to big studios like Y Yoga, I think at the time had 4 studios, eventually had 12. And so I was involved in an organization that could support me more full time. But I will say to everyone out there, it's like, there's ways to do that. It wasn't like I was teaching yoga full time, although I know plenty of people who did that. Part of my world was management, teacher management, auditions, creating teacher trainings and a teacher training program. So I was using other parts of my life skills to kind of finance myself and also teaching, and also happened to be in the yoga world that I loved. But the studio is what let me do it sort of gracefully full time because they could afford a full-time salary. So, but then later I left the studio and went out on my own, and that's been a different sort of kettle of fish, so to speak. But that's what kind of moved me full-time like in the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. I can relate to that a lot. I did a lot of teaching, but then also teacher training and, workshopping and, moving around. And I think for me, that transition to going fully on my own, and then like deciding what I wanted that to look like was, sort of the turning point for me in my career. And so like, what did that look like when you decided that you were going to let go of the studio as that safety net and move into like your own brand? How did you make that transition?
It was great. And it had been so there's like always like our yoga and our personal lives is always like this, right? So I had reached a point in Vancouver. First of all, I was the director of what was it called? I think my title was Director of Teachers College and Teacher Development. So I was just creating all the teacher trainings for Y Yoga. And then I was also, they were like, you created the teacher trainings. Now you don't have to spend time on that. So now let's also have you help with auditions, mentorship, all that stuff, which was great. Loved that. But they were reaching a point where they kind of felt like we have our trainings. It's a well-oiled machine. We don't really need someone to monitor it anymore. We can just sort of manage it. So they didn't really need me as much in the role that I had been doing. And at the same time, personal life, I went through this thing where I was like, I looked around and I was like, I don't have a husband and kids, which I totally thought, I was like, I'm going to have a husband and kids. And so at 40, I looked around, and this is what led to one of my books, which I wrote, was because of this experience where I was like, where where's my baby daddy? Where are my children? And I was like, okay. And I went out and was like, I'm going to stop eating popcorn and drinking red wine and sitting on my couch and moping that I don't have this, and go out and see if I can make this happen. So at around 40, I went out and joined all the dating sites and tried to like, meet the guy, the father of my baby. So like had navigated that whole world of online dating. Anyway, so I went through that whole crazy thing. Because one of the reasons I'd been staying in my job was because I thought if I ever had maternity leave, I wanted maternity leave, and as entrepreneurs, you don't get that. But once I realized anyway, so that's a whole big side story of that journey. But once I kind of came to the place where I was like, oh, that's not how I'm going to create family. That's not what it's going to be for me. And then I thought, well, then I want to be mobile. You out there might be relating to that. I want to be able to go anywhere and hang out with my nieces and hang out with my family. And if I'm not going to be here with kids and I want to be able to travel, I got to take advantage of that then. If that's not the gift, then I have to figure out what the gift is. So that's what prompted me to transition out of staying in a local studio and to moving on my own. So I think that the motivation and to know why you want to do it and what you're going to get helps to make the work that you need to do to build that. It's more exciting because then you're like, I know why I'm doing this. It's not just because it's scary, right? To take that leap where you go, I don't know, where I don't have someone who's going to feed me the paycheck, regardless of how well it's going. I'm the one who's going to have to make this happen. And sometimes we have ideas about it too. Like I thought, I was like, oh, well, I'm going to take a massive salary cut. Like I'm going to have to be frugal for a while. And one of my fellow teacher trainers was like, how do you know that's true? Maybe that's not true. And I was like, oh, maybe that's again, those beliefs, right? I was like, maybe that's not true. And it wound up not to be true. I wound up doing, like it was a transition that actually worked. And then I did better. I was able to expand beyond what I'd been doing. So that was like, but you don't know. We don't know. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's so many similarities. A little bit different, but very similar. There's something that happens to you in your 40s, man. It just like changes the game. I was actually talking with Gil about this the other day about how like, and that I would even love to continue the conversation, in another episode, but like something really has happened through my work that has informed like identity that I didn't know that I had, right? And it's sort of what you're saying, like, I thought I should get married. My parents died when I was young, so I got married and I had the 3 kids before I was 25. And now I'm 45 and they're all going to college. And I'm like, wait a second, what was this? I mean, I don't regret it. And that was a lot of shoulds, So it's so interesting when you get to this place where you have that self-awareness where you can say, oh, I don't have to do anything. I can do really what makes my heart sing and what, lights me up. And so I think that transition can be really exciting. And you're right. Who knows what's going to happen? Like, is it really true that you're going to have to struggle? Never. A lot of people's experiences, no, so I think that
yeah,
when you get out on your own, you do have a lot more flexibility and freedom. I know for me, I wanted to go online since the get-go. Even when I was teaching in an academic setting, I wanted to create online curriculum that was scalable. I have a master's in curriculum development and management, similar to what you have as well. And I knew that creating scalable content was really what I wanted to do. And I wanted to still support it, but I didn't want to be beholden to these 30 bodies in a class or these, 25 yogis in a training or whatever it was. So creating the online digital content was like a huge motivator for me. And originally my teacher trainings were supposed to be professional development for educators. I wanted educators to learn how to come clean to their students without projection. So it wasn't about teaching teachers how to do yoga, asana, or pranayama in class. It was about teaching them to have their own practice so that they had the svadhyaya skills to not come and project their BS onto our kids. And there's a whole backstory for where that came from, but it led me down this path. So how did you get into the online world and what do you like about it?
Yes. Yeah. It was interesting. I took some online courses I don't know, it's got to be like 2012, 11, something like that. And with teachers that I loved, one teacher in particular who I just adore and still adore to this day. But I took his online course and I'm like, why is this so hard? Why is this so painful? And I thought there's got to be a better way. And also, you could sort of see the writing on the wall, and in the early 2010s, whatever. You're like, things are going to get more online, and thinking ahead. And I don't know if I was this clear about it at that time, but having an online, as folks out there know, online resources as a yoga teacher, where usually you're bound by hour to hour presence. You got to be there for the class or the workshop or the private. But when you have online, you can create value without you having to be there, right? Which is so important for sustainability, for avoiding burnout, for resilience, and also for getting your message beyond your local geographic group. So you can expand your teaching voice. And, we only need 100 true fans. Someone says something like that. And so when you can, share your message globally, or at least to the countries that speak your language, then you have more of a chance of finding the people who really anchor and resonate with what you can offer. So anyway, so all of that is to say that I started seeing, like, I want to know how to create online curriculum that works. Because this amazing teacher who I love, who's an academic too, as well as a practitioner, I was like, I don't think this quite got it. And I feel like we could do better. So I want to do better. I want to be able to make curriculum that works. And I thought, you know what, I might be able to also help and be a bridge. Cause it's like, Gil laughs. I'm like Gil's left brain and he's like the right brain. So I can like help people. One of my modest superpowers is I can take this kind of lightning of inspiration that people have and help to organize it. I can capture their lightning in a bottle and then structure it. And that's what I help people do. It's like to create methodology out of the beautiful madness that might be out there. And so I thought I can maybe help some of these yogis who, we might be exceptions to this. And I don't mean to generalize, but a lot of yogis are organic kind of thinkers, right? They're feeling people. They're embodied. They don't always think in terms of like boxes or structure. And I thought maybe I can help create that bridge so that they can share their understanding and their knowledge with more efficacy. Let's make it more effective. So, and I think that there's, talking to scale, which you've done so beautifully with your work. But it's like also helping yogis, be resilient and be sustainable, because yoga's got a good message that a lot of people could benefit from. So, hey, let's make that louder and make it more effective. So.
Absolutely. So
Yeah.
when you started, when I started, we didn't have LMS or a learning management system. So I literally built it on the back end of some WordPress site, and it was clunky and junky and all the things. And I don't know why people bought it, to be honest with you. But people, they liked the content, but the platform wasn't great. When you started, what was available to you and what are you using now?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when I started with Thinkific, which I still use to this day. So Thinkific and Teachable seem super similar to me. Like one's Canadian, and since I lived in Vancouver and Thinkific was anchored in Vancouver, I was like, okay, great, this is what I'll use. But I also helped universities for a while, which it sounds like you had experience in the academic world too. So, I did my master's. My master's that I did was actually online, and we did it through Blackboard, which is such a horrible, horrible beast. And then when I was working, I worked with some university clients to help their faculty move their projects online. And that was mostly in Canvas, which is great. In fact, people can still you can use it actually for free. But the problem is that it doesn't serve most of our yoga entrepreneurs out there because it doesn't have payment portals and managed students and stuff like that, which is what we need. So Teachable and Thinkific, and Kajabi is, a massive all-in-one, which is super expensive. You don't necessarily need that, but it kind of combines website, client management and coursification. Although I always say this whenever I talk about Kajabi, I really hate their quiz functionality. It's so bad. Anyway, so Thinkific is what I use. And I think it's a good middle of the road solution. It's not, massive like Kajabi is, but it makes it super easy for creators to organize their course content, and it makes it into a pretty site for you, and it can manage payment processing. All of those things are pretty helpful. So
Awesome.
I mean,
Awesome.
there's a million out there, as you know, and I'm not versed in all of them,
We
but
just
yeah.
moved. We actually moved, which I do not recommend anybody doing. Now, hindsight 2020, I would not do it again. But we moved to Learn World because with our yoga therapy program, especially IOIT just updated their standards and they're, allowing for online, but 500 hours has to be synchronous, which is fine, but we needed a way to track it. So we needed more robust grading system. Like now we're operating more like an academic institution, and the accountability measures that we needed. But Teachable was great for a long time. We used Teachable. That was much, much better than what I had cobbled together. So I think what I hear most from people is that they just get so overwhelmed. And the two biggest things that I hear from people is that they're overwhelmed by videoing themselves, and they're overwhelmed by all of the different payment processing and things like that. So tell me a little bit about how you have gone about getting comfortable behind a camera and what your process is. Do you do your editing? Do you send it out? Everybody's different, and I've tried it both ways. So I'd love to hear what your take is.
Yeah. So one of the benefits of having an MFA in acting is that you're not uncomfortable in front of a camera. So that was one of the benefits of 3 years of a master's degree in performing arts. So I think that I came into it with a greater ease in terms of being in front of the camera. But I do it all myself. So, and all you need is an iPhone and a tripod. Guys, get a tripod. It will save you so much pain. Just get a tripod. I have a whole article, actually. I'm a big fan of sharing resources. So on my blog, I have an article that I put out at the beginning of COVID when people were doing this, which tells you all the tech I use, like the adapters, my wireless mics that I use, which anyway, so there's tech resources on that if you kind of want a place to start. So the thing about video is it can be really simple. And here's another thing about video: unless you're teaching a class or a practice, really your video should be pretty short. So like 6 minutes or less, right? So like key idea, and then give them that to chew on, and then, integrate. So that just kind of can help take the pressure off. If you think you have to do this massive lecture, you don't. But in terms of getting started, I would say imagine, first of all, figure out where in your camera you need to look like you're looking at it. Because if you look, you know what I mean? If you look at yourself and then you look at the video playback, it might look like you're looking off. One thing that might help folks is you can create a script for yourself. Now, I don't recommend doing that consistently, because it's a little bit better. Just create a poster board and put your key points and then speak organically about them. It's much more natural. However, for some of the courses that I did, one of them in particular, I had a lot of content to describe. And so I created a script, and you can use like an app called Teleprompter, and it turns this into a teleprompter. So you're looking at your script in the right place. That's kind of technical, but just practice and pretend the camera is just a friend that you're talking to, like your buddy. That's going to help you seem more natural. And what I would say is that presence and personality is more important than perfection, right? It's kind of like we sort of think I have to do it. I can't mess up. I mess up plenty in my videos. You pick it up and move on. It's a conversation. It does not have to be perfect. In fact, perfection is the death of it, especially with something like video where you feel like you should make it exactly so. Don't worry about it. People like a little humanity, right?
100%. So I can't tell you how many times we've redone all of our stuff, especially the core courses. We've refilmed and refilmed and refilmed. But a couple of years ago, we were during COVID, and I had a woman in Greece, and we were on a live lecture. And she said, I just have to tell you, she was like, when I first saw some of your videos, I was just appalled. She was like, you were making mistakes. The editing wasn't perfect. Da, da, da. And then I read more about, we were talking about Panchavritis, the 5 mental fluctuations. And she was like, wait a second. It's okay for me to make a mistake. And it was like so liberating for her that she wanted to come on camera and thank me for being more authentic in that way. But I agree with you. Keep them short, and organic is best. You can always edit it out. I think one of the biggest things that I tell people is if you make a mistake, pause for 15 seconds or more, and then start at the beginning of the sentence rather than trying to start in the middle, so that when you're editing, you don't have this weird, with the head or the mouth or whatever. and then just go on. But there's some great editing softwares out there these days. So I really
Yeah.
implore people to do it.
What have you used for your editing software that you've
So
played with?
I played with for a long time. We stuck with like iMovie, right? But then I went into I started playing with the Adobe Premiere Pro. And I like that a lot. I'm going blind, Rachel. The older I get, the more I need to wear my glasses more frequently. So I really have to like, wear my glasses, and I have to like pull it up and be very intentional about it. But I taught my 18-year-old to edit, so he does some of our editing, and then I do some of it as well. But I've gotten super efficient with Adobe Premiere Pro. What do you use?
Awesome. I use something called Camtasia,
Hmm.
which is it's like what's the other thing that those guys use? It's TechSmith. And so they do things like Snagit and like screen capture stuff. And I really like it because it has it's kind of an educational one. And so it's real easy to pull in like title screens or to add animations or to add in text. So a lot of my YouTube videos, I will pull write text on the screen as well, just to kind of reinforce key ideas or to spell things out. So I like it because it makes that super easy. I used to use iMovie and I have to do all these like screen text things. And it was just like a little tedious. So Camtasia makes that all super easy. It's not without its flaws. None of them, this is the thing, none of them are going to be perfect. Your platforms are not going to be perfect. Your editing software is not going to be perfect. There is no perfect out there. But you can really work. The key is to find something that has most of what you want, and then you can work around the rest. So
yeah, no, I completely agree. And microphones are so important.
So
Microphones,
important.
lighting, and
That's
it doesn't
it.
have to be anything crazy. I mean, even right now, we've just got like a little uplight
Yeah.
just to give us a little bit more brightness. But I think those are the two things that really can add so much value to a video. But I want to go back to what you said about personality, because I did not have the acting background. So those first early years, if you watch some of those old videos, it's like this. And it's
Yeah.
just very, and they would say, they'd be like, the content's great, but this is really boring. And I'd be like, all right, okay. But then I got a little bit more saucy. Like as the years went on, I was like, okay, they can see a little bit of my personality. Like that's okay. And I think that's what people want. A lot of times I'll
Yeah.
tell students, I'll be like, you have your people out there. Like you are a voice for somebody. So don't limit yourself and think that, oh, well, because you're not this, or you're not, you don't look like this, or have this body type or whatever, that you're not going to have people. You have people, so really capitalizing on your own personality and your perspective, I think can be really helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. And that's why I think the simple trick of like pretend you're talking to your bestie, you know,
Yeah.
can help. Or get, for the first time through, if you've got a bestie who's local, bring them in and have them sit behind the camera, right? Or so it can become more conversational. Because you're right. It's like people want to see that. And one of the things that can help too is that I have a whole like a YouTube channel on anatomy, or and some other things I taught. I get excited about teaching these things. So I think also when you're speaking to something you're excited about, let it show. Be like, oh my God, this is amazing. Like people are going to get excited if you're excited.
Yeah.
So that's another thing that can help.
Totally. Well, so
Yeah.
we've talked about the transition from, one career to another, moving into yoga, going online. How does all of this fuel your heartfelt desire?
Oh, I think that my heartfelt desire is to keep learning. Like, I think if I think about the things that keep pulling me, it's to stay engaged and keep deepening my well and keep diving into the mystery. And so the work that I do with curriculum building, it allows me to stay in process with people and to be and to keep learning myself, because what I love to do is I learn and then I kind of transmute that into a curriculum that then's useful. And so what I've created is an ability to keep exploring what I am curious about and passionate about. And I think that that's what keeps us going. I mean, hey guys, any job you get, even if you like create the ideal yoga career, there's going to be 20% of your job that you're like, oh my God, right? There's always going to be the 20% of admin answering whatever it is. That's going to be like, got to build another spreadsheet, whatever. But as long as there's something which you feel, and you guys, like, out there, when you feel like, oh, this serves my heart. And even if it's hard, like, following your dharma, it doesn't always mean it's pleasant, right? It's not always easy, but it fulfills that voice inside of you. It goes like, yes, this is an expression of what I believe to be true, or this is moving me in the direction of truth. Sorry, I got a little Zoom things there.
That's awesome. No, definitely. I think that I couldn't agree more. It's, the passion that we have to share. I love the evolution that happens, when we are, living our dharma. I used to tell my teacher, our karma precipitates our dharma. Like, I can't be in somebody else's dharma because literally my karma got me here. And so I just love how, if you allow it to, it opens you up. It creates space for you to see it from other people's perspective. It creates space for you to tap into that wellspring of unconditional love for yourself and others. If I fall into this idea that I know and that this is the only way, then I'm limiting myself. I don't have the capacity to see it in other ways. And that's really what I think yoga is. It's this broader union of, like, my lived experience is based on, my perspective of the world is based on my lived experience. It's not universally true. What's your perspective? And how can we connect in that way and learn from each other? Yeah, I was actually just talking about that in an internal meeting about, as we, because I feel like I'm constantly evolving curriculum. I'm constantly changing. I'm looking back and I'm like, how Gil and I were talking about it the other day. He's like, yeah, I taught it this way. And then, oh, wait, no, I want to teach it this other way, or I've learned it now a different way. That, I think, is really like where the magic is. And it keeps us from being rote, and it keeps us passionate about what we're doing.
Yeah. This is such a good point. Like, we can also sometimes get trapped by our own structure. It's like, if I create, like, I've created a teacher training that I teach a certain way, there's certain principles of alignment, and that's how we learn it. And then it's kind of like, well, but I want to grow beyond that too, So it's kind of like, okay, here's one, and here's the next step, and here's the next step, and to let ourselves be part of the mystery. So it's kind of like, as much as we are agents, to also let ourselves be worked upon by these universal forces, to create some space to listen to something new and then step into that, right? That's what keeps it going.
It absolutely does. I haven't been trained in Iyengar principles, but we have a teacher on staff who has, and I'll listen to her. And it was funny because years ago, when we first started working together, she'd say something and I'd be like, that's not how it is. And now it's more like, oh, that's a different way to look at it, or that's a different cue, or like, because I sometimes get very, like, very left brain. It's like, this is the language that I use. My husband's a linguistics, so he's a linguist, and he speaks many languages. So I'm like, this is the context, right? But then there's so many borders and boundaries that I can't connect beyond that. So I think that that's been one of the biggest lessons for me, is that there really isn't a right way. There are different types of perspectives and styles and interpretations of things, and that's really where the unity comes from. So yeah,
that's what I mean. I think that's so important. I talk to a lot of different schools about curriculum, because they all, anyways. So what I'm very clear about in this curriculum that I created for folks is that it's not about the right or the wrong, right? It's kind of like, it's always, when we're teaching a certain way or using a certain style of cueing, or we're teaching a class with more breath focused cueing, or we're teaching a class with more alignment focused cueing. It's not one's better or worse, but one will reveal something, and then you kind of gain something and lose something from each different way of doing it. So it's not like, this is the way. It's kind of like, what's the experience? And this is where I think someone's teaching voice can be so interesting, because when you go like, okay, here are all my teaching tools. I can cue with the breath, I can cue alignment, I can cue using these kinds of cues or stabilizing cues, blah, 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 blah. I got this whole, symphony of opportunity here. And how I choose to use this, I'm going to sacrifice certain things as part of this experience, but I'm going to sort of turn up the volume, or like my little slider knobs of my orchestra on certain things. And then what is my intention as a teacher? What do I want to create from this experience? And then what are the tools that I'm going to pull in to do this? And that's what creates a quote unquote style of yoga, right? And we have different kind of tools that we we pull from. So not to villainize whatever, like I'd say people are like, what kind of yoga do you like? I'm like, I like all the yoga, the big yoga slut, love them all, but not all at, but ones at certain times. Like I'm not going to like all of them all the time. Certain ones are going to be better at other times than others. So.
Absolutely. Well, you've alluded to this a little bit, but I'd like to know more about how you work with people to help them to create curriculum. It sounds like you work with larger, university, academic sort of outlets. And then, do you work with smaller individual teachers? What does that look like? Tell me a little bit about that.
Sure. There's a whole range. I don't work with universities anymore. That was kind of something I did, which was super useful. Very glad that I had that opportunity to sort of be in that world for a little bit, but I work with everybody. So I work from, a lot of the bigger studios, not bigger studios, but a lot of studios typically who have been in existence for a couple of years, who don't have a teacher training yet, don't know how to do it, want to do it. That's typically who I work with, because they're the ones who are like, I really want to be able to offer this to my community, but either I don't know how to create curriculum, I don't have 400 hours to create curriculum, which is, at least how long it should take. And so they don't know where to start. And so that's when they find me, and I can provide a whole different range of support. So I actually created an online course, which was Create Your Training, which is like, what's your mission, your vision in the world? Like, what do you want to create? What do you want? And then from that vision of the teachers you want to kind of engender and foster, working backwards to how do you create a curriculum that meets that? And so but I got to be honest, not a lot of people have the time or the bandwidth to do that from scratch, but it's there. And then on the other end, I've created a curriculum, which a lot of folks use as a foundation for their teacher training. And, sometimes it's like lesson plan, right? It's like very mapped out. It's a huge guide for folks. And sometimes they'll take that and they'll use that just as it is. And then what I encourage them to do is to adapt it, because I want them I don't like, studios are not cookie cutter. We have different, right? We got different voices. You have a different community. So to take that and then to rather than spending your time building some of these things from the ground up, to spend your time adapting and making it your own, right? And kind of pulling it into your heart and sharing the things you want to share. So, but I've worked with, individuals to help with things like Yoga Alliance registration, which I'm very familiar with at this point. That into people want to create an online course, and I take them through the process of it from beginning to end. So they have a roadmap. And then once they know how to create that, then they can do that for any subject, any course, anytime. So that's a really useful one for folks who want to create online courses. I've mentored people one-on-one with things like, helping to just honestly, sometimes people just need a coach to kind of hold their hand and say, like, these are your deadlines. How are we going to get you there? And to move them through that. So there's a whole range, but from individuals to studios,
Awesome. It's
fun.
I love that. I wish I had more bandwidth. I've gotten lost. I've gotten lost in the business of it, honestly, because, one of our goals was to create jobs during COVID, and we created jobs, and which was great.
Awesome.
But now it's, there's a certain level of responsibility. I think from my perspective, I love the online world. And when you do create jobs, and, I wanted to be able to offer yoga teachers the opportunity to teach Patanjali and yoga, Jnana yoga, like these real, like, ancient practices that are much more introspective from their living room in their pajamas, and get paid a decent amount of money for it. Because that was the dream. It's like, I told my teacher when I got done with my 500-hour, I said, I don't think I want to be a studio teacher. Like, I want to do more of the philosophy stuff. I love teaching an asana class. And some people just get lit by that. And for me, I get lit by that other stuff. And so bringing in and creating, those jobs was fantastic. And there's now a responsibility to maintain that scale, which takes me out of, I can only create a certain amount. Whereas used to, it was 100% create. And now it's like 20% create, 75% manage, and 5% administrative. And it's like, administrative is the part you're like, you know. So I love
Yeah.
that you are able to work with people one-on-one. If somebody wanted to get in touch with you and to have that relationship and get some guidance and support, how would they find you?
Yeah. So you can go to my site, which is Rachel Yoga, Rachel yoga.com. And I'm happy to meet with anybody. I have like a link on my site under the contact me. Also, you can find me on Instagram, Rachel Scott Yoga, or YouTube, Rachel Scott Yoga. But I am happy to meet with people for like a half an hour. I just have, it's like book a coffee chat with me, bring your coffee, grab some time. And I'm really like, it's one of the things, okay, about being online is that you get to connect with people all over the world. And there's something really magical about that. So I'm very sincere when I put it out there that grab a time with me and like, let's meet and let's, whether or not you are like, Rachel, I want to buy something from you, like, but just meet and like brainstorm or be like, I don't know how to do my sound for my video. What do I do? Or I don't know if I should create a teacher training. How do I know if I'm ready? And any of those I'm just really happy to meet people out there in the world who are, you know, kind of embarking on this path. And if I can be of service or having chat helps, then reach out. So that's probably the easiest way to do it.
I love it. I love it. It's just,
Yeah.
I love the accessibility and affordability that you bring to the community, because that is one of, like, we had this whole conversation, and this is perhaps a little controversial, but I've said it before. I guess I can say it again. We were talking, everybody was really up in arms, especially during COVID times, about like appropriation of yoga and all these things. And
Oh
like,
yeah.
one of my best friends is Indian, and I actually trained her first because she had never gotten a formal training, but she's very, spiritual and all the things. And so she sort of vetted our initial training, which wasn't very physically focused. It was much more spiritually based.
Mm.
And so she and I did a little talk one day about it and all the things. And I was like, hey guys, I'm like, if this is your practice, there's nothing appropriative about it, right? If this is your practice, if I'm not going to go and say that I have a practice and I'm not going to do something once if I don't do it, so I will only teach what I practice. And that's sort of
Yeah.
like the heart of it, right? But I feel like, sometimes when we make things so inaccessible, whether it is money or whether it is time or whatever, that is sort of capitalizing on something that shouldn't be capitalized on. Like and I'm saying it in a much softer way than I've said it before, but it's like, one of the biggest like insults, I think, to the community of yoga is creating offerings that are so wildly inaccessible, to individuals, that they can't get the information, or they can't, and it's not only money. I mean, I've seen it in other ways. I've seen it in, like, um, top dogging domination of, I mean, we've seen it in the industry of, like, unethical practices and different, facilitations and things like that. But just creating a place where it's like, I'm teaching you this, and I want you to go, and I want you to do it, and I want you to teach it hands free. Like, I have no attachment to it. Like, I just want to get you this information. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah. Do you mean like people holding on, like, do you mean like people holding on to things, like clutching information to them, or branding it in a way
Yeah,
that
yeah,
they
yeah.
can't be
Yeah,
shared?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Stuff
Yeah.
like
Like
that.
this is my
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
style.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, it gets very,
Yeah.
it's like, it's very much, it's like, I don't feel like that's the intention. The intention, and
Yeah.
Jessica Char talks about it. It's like, you have a teacher, and your teacher is going to pass this along to you, and then you're going to practice it. And then the way you teach it is through your lens, through your karmic lens,
Yeah.
and I think that free, whether it is freely given financially, or freely given in, spirit, or in, whatever, and that support is so important. I really vibe with that, and
Yeah.
I'm super excited I had the opportunity to chat with you.
Yeah, me too. I just have to, like, because of what you just said, I just want to illuminate Paul Greeley from Yin, who did not trademark Yin or make it a thing, but just like out there. You know what I mean? Bless you, Paul Greeley. I just want public props to him
Yeah.
for that, because I think that's really like that. It's that kind of generosity of just
Yeah.
like, here's, it's like,
Well,
yes, thank you.
emotional freedom technique is another one that's like that. The intention of the tapping, the emotional freedom technique that
Ah,
people use, he did not ever want that to be like sold. And so like if, and this is for individuals that are listening right now, don't pay for a training, go online. All of his information is open source, and he
that's
did
awesome.
that to give people those resources. I feel like what Gil's doing too with, the accessibility and affordability of his content, I've looked at
Yeah.
your content, you do the same thing. I mean, like it's accessible. It's, you being accessible to even meet with people and like sort of consult or brainstorm as, you know, in some parts of
Mm,
the industry is unheard of, so I think that that
mm.
is just so special. And I just want to commend you for,
Oh,
giving your light in that way.
oh, thank you. A rising tide lifts all ships. Isn't that what they say?
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
and right back at you, Michelle. Like, look at everything that you've created and are offering in a way that's super accessible to people. Like, I know I said this before, but I'll say it on camera now. Just like, thank you for your work and for your sharing and for your generosity. It's super appreciated. It goes very noticed. I know that I've appreciated it from afar, and it's a pleasure to be able to say that in person to you.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, I think the biggest thing, for again for us is creating accessibility and authentically sharing. One of the things, that I think that has been a big win for MVP has been, getting into so many different markets. I have been
Mm,
criticized for, pricing things really low and things like that, but we've given training and this content to people who otherwise would never have been able to afford it. And, I
yeah,
think that and the stories of, people's lives changing, people's marriages changing, people's relationships with themselves changing, that's what motivates us to keep doing it. And I just, we keep surrounding ourselves with other professionals like yourself and, Gil and, Leslie, all the people, and, just continuing. Lori's another big one to just share, this knowledge because so many people don't know what their body can do and how to be
mm,
embodied, in their
hmm,
lived experience. I used to say, like, if we look at yourself energetically as physical, intellectual, emotional, and spiritual, I'm only one quarter physical. I'm living all this time in my head. Like, get in your body, feel something and
yeah,
figure out the message between body and mind.
yeah,
It's so transformative. So thank you so
yeah.
much for being a part of that movement.
Aw, well, thanks, Michelle. Thanks for having me on for the chat. It's so nice to connect with you in person.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, tell us, is there anything else that you've got coming up? Any new releases? Anything you want to share with the community?
Ah, let's see. Well, yeah, you can always find me online. But the next 8 months of my life are traipsing around with Gil on the Nerve Tour. So, you can keep track of us that way or find Gil in a city. I highly recommend checking out his talk. If you, I mean, you got to talk to him before, but I mean, it's really beautiful and transformative. And I'm super enjoying one that I have the business that I can take on the road, which has been super fun, even teaching from my RV, which is hilarious. So if you're so inspired, come and join me for an RV yoga class. It's very fun. And if you're in a city where Gil is, come and visit us because come say hi at the talk because we'll be there. So yeah.
That's great. Well, we went to the Nerve Tour. I cannot wait to do an actual class. I've done Cadaver Lab out in Colorado twice. This will be my third year. I think next year I'm going to do one with Gil, though. I think that's like the next step in the progression. But so excited for y'all. The Nerve Tour is amazing. If you get a chance to check it out, check it out. If not, check out Rachel's site and we'll keep you posted for when that Nerve Tour gets loaded on Gil's site as well, which I know is forthcoming in the next 12 months or so. So we'll
Yeah.
keep you updated. Thank you,
Awesome.
Rachel. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Michelle.